where people from all different generations can intersect for info, commentary, and lots of hope. Please enjoy our first episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to our first episode. Today I'm going to be talking with Janelle Norman, one of our employees, one of my friends at Sunrise. Janelle has some unique experience in the training that she's been through. She's got some unique experience with the life that she's been through. Let's go talk to her, maybe we can learn a few things together. Yes, Janelle, welcome to The Beat. As you know, you've been a part of putting this together with me for the last few weeks, as you are very much a part of our worship team. And for those of you who don't know Janelle, Janelle is, well, you know what, Janelle, I will just let you explain who you are, what you do with the church, and what you do outside of Sunrise.
Sure, of course. So at the church, I have the role of being a worship arts administrator as well as the service coordinator. So with that, I do a lot of behind the scenes work and administrative work for worship arts. So that's my role within the church, and it's a great job. I really appreciate the team I work with. And then outside of my job, I am currently a student in my master's program. I am at Western Seminary getting a degree in Master's of Counseling, and currently I am also a MFT, Marriage and Family Therapist trainee. So with that, I am learning a lot about counseling and psychology and effects right now, of course, of the coronavirus with mental health. So that is me in a nutshell.
So first off, I guess I'd like to talk about what you just what you said a second ago. Like, obviously, right now we are dealing with some interesting times, being that I haven't seen you in months face to face or anybody. So there's a little bit of a lack of, obviously face to face, but that interpersonal communication, and just you can tell, at least I can tell, and the people that I talk to, that the world right now is really struggling with that that particular lack of closeness with everybody. So what have you seen from your side? Do you have any advice, particularly for people who may be struggling? I know that there's a lot of people who, both sides of the spectrum are very extroverted and want to get out because they miss people, and very introverted and don't want to get out because they're scared and are afraid of what could happen. So there's a lot of feelings. Just what would you like to speak to on that?
Yeah, and I want to really emphasize that everyone in their own way is being affected by the coronavirus, and wherever people are at, wherever you are at, in the process is completely okay. Some people might be struggling a lot, and some people might be feeling like they're just doing just fine. And wherever you are at in your process is totally okay and is applicable to you and your worldview. Um, in terms of isolation, though, it can be traumatic, and it does affect everyone. And as reasonable as it is to have shelter in place, isolation does come along with that. And so within that, the coronavirus and the shelter in place has really, allowed for the space for people to really slow down and really feel alone. And with that, feelings of intensity can be more prominent. For those who suffer with depression, those symptoms may increase. With, if those who suffer with anxiety, those symptoms may increase. And it's because, you're able to finally slow down and kind of get alone with those feelings. Where in, day-to-day life, you have your schedule, you're going, you're able to just kind of fast forward through all of the intense emotions. You're able just to kind of put it aside. Now you don't have that quick pace anymore. Now you don't have to, do as much anymore. And so that really allows for those feelings to intensify and to come up, and to be a little bit more present, which is a very common experience. Another element here, though, is that this time of isolation could be for some people very traumatic. There is big traumas in life, which are catastrophic things, the loss of somebody, death, some kind of, natural disaster that wipes out, communities. Those are huge traumas, but there's also little traumas as well. And that could include isolation. That could include losing, not being able to see your friends at church. And that is just as impactful and can be really devastating for a lot of people. And, that's why that connection piece, especially for extroverts, is so needed, because it's within connection that that people can really come alongside of each other and create a safe space to share their experiences of what has been traumatic for them in this season.
Right. Right. Cool. Well, I see a lot of, like, personally, I deal with I'm more extroverted side of things. I tend to be a little bit in the middle, but right now I would find that I'm suffering more from the extroverted side of the complications of being locked in, and I have a lot of friends that way too, and we're all kind of, struggling together. And I guess it's been nice to find, reaching out online, even though it is online, that there are other people to have find solace in and comfort in, because we are in a similar situation. It's easy to be like, we're all on the same Zoom call. It sucks, because it does. Yeah, I personally have been dealing with a lot of the, like you said, just kind of like, I've been bombarded by the reality of what is in front of me. I mentioned to you and to the people I've struggled with, my family situation recently has changed, that my grandmother passed away
Mhm.
during all of this. Not from COVID, thank goodness, just from, old age and complications that come with being a sickly person for many, many years. But that thrust me immediately into the realm of being the non-affected into the affected, and it was quite the transition, just from being one day like, oh, this isn't that bad, we're all just home doing stuff, I like eating extra food, I like all the extra time, to suddenly I can't see my family. My grandma's dying. I don't I don't know what my last words to her would be, were gonna be. So there was a whole level added of stress and trauma on top of things that I just wasn't expecting, and it really kind of blindsided me with it. But the thing that I got out of all of it was that the everything right now is so nuanced. It isn't just, oh, neighbor Joe down the street caught COVID, let's pray for him, that sucks, his family is, not doing so well. But all these really small nuanced things that nobody expects, like, I can't tell you how not healthy watching a streamed funeral is, as part of the grieving process. There is a very much a lack of grief when you go through that I wasn't personally expecting. I thought, oh cool, I'll at least get to see the funeral from far away, being that I live in California. And I'll tell you what, that didn't help much. It didn't help much at all. But this is kind of the world we're in right now. The world has changed, albeit for in a more permanent way too. So for a while now, we're going to be dealing with these kind of, I don't know, like, just changes in the infrastructure of how we handle ourselves and our mental health. So, I mean, going forward, what do you think of the area of mental health, and what do you think people should be doing now that we've all collectively gone through this traumatic event together?
Right. Yeah. And um, Ian, as I've once said before, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Yeah, thank you.
And for anyone who's experiencing personal loss right now, it is a really terrible time of loss, and we have to acknowledge that. And so, within that, technology can be kind of limiting, just like you said, Ian. Going, to an online stream funeral is not the same as being able to be with people. It's not the same as being able to celebrate the life of a loved one. It doesn't make up. It can't. There's no way. And although, as appreciative of technology, that I am, and how amazing technology can be. It does not, replace face to face, eye to eye contact.
The hand to hand, not hand to hand combat, because that would be fighting, but like touching people for
Right.
sure. Yeah, like
Yeah.
just a hug for goodness sakes.
Right. There's these things called, actually, we have called mirror neurons, and it's really important, and because these mirror neurons is what helps us attach to our mothers when we're babies, and that creates safety. And so, as we're in community and we have these times of being able to be together in connectivity, we have those same mirror neurons. That's what helps us to feel safe, connected. It's what makes us feel like reciprocated in a relationship or in connectivity. And so, my biggest, thought and my biggest suggestion would be to create some kind of way to connect. And I know right now people are very limited in being able to have face-to-face contact and being able to have, real life interactions.
Right.
However, a phone call, a Zoom call, something, although it doesn't replace what is, authentic connection, it's still something. It's
It is
still,
still something.
yeah, it's still a way to connect. But, so I definitely recommend, finding ways of connection, finding ways of reaching out, finding a group where you can just vent and say and express your frustrations, or your doneness with the coronavirus, or your grief, because
Yeah, absolutely.
this is a very sad time.
The it's interesting. I found that just out of sheer boredom, I've started to reach out to people who I haven't talked to in a long time. Just texting people who like I happen to see. I don't go on Facebook that often, but I do occasionally for church to check on like the church Facebook. And I was on the other day, and I got a little notification from a buddy who I used to play music with, and I hadn't seen in I don't know, it's probably been 5 6 years now. And we were really, really close at one time. So I thought, like, oh man, I haven't talked to Dan in a while. I'll reach out to him. And it was amazing. Just that the instant you get that text back, like, hey, dude, I haven't talked to you in forever, you get this elated feeling like, oh my gosh, finally, someone who cares about me, someone who I haven't talked to in a while. So personally, I absolutely suggest and hope anybody who's listening, I say, like, reach out to people you haven't talked to in a long time. There's no better time like the present. We have the technology. I mean, you have the thousands of Facebook friends for a reason, for goodness sake. Like, pick one of them and just have a conversation with them. Tell them, you care and you're there, because the more we do this, the better it's going to feel for all of us as we try to get through this. So the another thing I'd like to talk to you about is one of the things that you're kind of a little bit of a special situation is that you're also a student, like you said. Right now, obviously the world's falling to pieces infrastructure wise. But my mom is a teacher. She's an elementary teacher, so I am very privy to all the educational things. I'm a big believer in public schooling and things like that. So I follow a lot of what's going on. And right now, a lot of what's going on is getting weird. Like, obviously we've seen the jokes like, oh, I'm tired of teaching my kids. It's so much harder than I thought it was. Like, teachers have a hard job. Yeah, they've got a hard job. But students have a hard job too. Right now, especially because not only was the educational industry, if we'll call it that, was on a upward trajectory of just being more expensive and like more work and harder things to do, like more complicated as it goes. But now we have this extra added of, we can't be in class together. We can't do the labs there. We can't do all these things. And again, it comes down to the interpersonal relationship thing. Like, you can't even see your teacher. So how are you supposed to have a relationship with somebody like that? Are you supposed to have a relationship with somebody like that now? So I just kind of wanted to see where you were at in this, because I'm not a student anymore. I've been out of college for a few years now. What are they doing? How does it feel? What's it look like?
Yeah, it's definitely different, and it's kind of a crazy, whirlwind of, from being one day in class to the next time you're supposed to have class, for it to be like immediately online. And it was very rushed. It was very very, very just overwhelming, for both. students and professors, especially professors who or teachers who are not so tech savvy. You it's it's been, there's definitely been some difficulties.
I
And
bet. I used to work IT at a school, so I know how that goes. Professors are very smart people, but not when it comes to computers sometimes.
yeah, it's like a whole different world of knowledge that you have to have. And so, I think that I've definitely, in the beginning was personally frustrated with the sudden change and missing and recognizing that there's a loss of not being in the classroom. And I can't imagine what it's like for kids right now who are,
Oh yeah, like little kids, yeah.
yeah, who are so used to their learning environment, so used to being in the classroom and having that structure to having to do all of this at home. It's
Kids aren't known for having a lot of self willpower and structure right off the bat. So
right. So it's been a whirlwind, but I think that um it's I'm thankful to have the ability to still have education during this time. I know that's a privilege. I know that that's something that not everyone can have. And so I'm grateful for that, of course.
I've heard of people from other countries. Like, for those of you who don't know, I'm was born in South America. I'm a missionary kid, so I have a link to Brazil and have friends in Brazil and things like that. And I pay attention to what's going on in there. And there are places in like that in Brazil where the internet just doesn't exist. Like there is no internet and there's hardly electricity because it'll just go out for a day or two at a time. So how are, we're so lucky to be able to have the infrastructure to move to this style of education in this country.
Absolutely, absolutely. So definitely grateful for that. But, I think that, there is a loss that comes with acknowledging that the classroom is no longer a place that's outside of the house right now. It's harder because there's more distractions and, but all at the same time, we have this beautiful resource of technology, of being able to still come to class and have that community and talk about these really hard things, especially in my classes where we get to talk about some of the hardships we see with clients and in our own lives. And so, it's still, school is still something that is very, very much appreciated in my own life, but it's definitely different. And it's a little bit harder, but I'm still grateful for it.
How what do you think is like the hardest thing you're dealing with right now in the change? If there's like a specific point of contention.
Are you just saying in general or with?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, which with school, yeah, like in general with school, with your schooling. Like, is there hang up? Is there one thing that you found in the changes that is just like, holy cow, this is hard to deal with?
yeah, I think that, you know, personally, I think the loss of my graduation ceremony it's hitting me. It's hard. There's something more to a ceremony that's just a celebration. It's a rite of passage, and
Absolutely.
there's this feeling that comes with celebrating and being recognized for your accomplishments. And I have ate, lived, sweat school these last 3 years. I literally lived for my education.
Right.
And that's how you have to do it when you're in grad school. I mean, it's just the expectation. And so you go for it. And
It'd just be real nice to have somebody to pat you on the back in person and go, "You did it!
yeah,
You finally did it!" And I could see how that's a little bit just kind of like empty feeling when it just doesn't have quite the crescendo. I mean, I've played. I don't know in how many orchestras that do graduation ceremonies. I've played Pomp and Circumstance, the song, more times than I want to eat. Like even thinking about it makes me nauseous. Just holy cow! But every time that I've sat in the orchestra and played that song for a group of hundreds to thousands of people, graduating, it's special. It feels good. It feels right. It feels like you're part of something, and it's like, you know what? These people have devoted a large chunk of their life to something important that they believe in. So to have everybody struggling with the fact that they were not going to be able to have that in the same way. I told you in the meeting earlier, we had a production meeting about how I had to send a video to my cousin. My cousin is graduating high school. Charlie, if you're out there, congratulations. This is a much better video than the one I was trying to send to you 3 year school. But yeah, so their school set up a video system where they were like, send a message to your family, tell them thank you for graduating or happy they graduated or whatever. And it was a very small upload size limit that did not allow for a long enough video. I couldn't get it short enough. And then when I tried to just write a note, it was a very 180 character limit. So I was like just the most empty. I had something just beautiful written out. It was like, I don't get to see my cousin very often. I wanted to send something special. And the technology is like, nope, you don't get that. You only get 180 characters. So that's two sides of the technology thing. It is our saving grace right now that it's all we have. But there are those limitations, and it's all we got. And we're just going to have to deal with those sort of changes. So
right.
It is rough. It is rough.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, I can't imagine what it's like for graduating seniors, because, a conversation that I'm having in some of my school settings is seniors are not just being, not able to graduate. They're not really being able to be fully launched into college right now either, because colleges are all online. And
that's a feeling. You remember that feeling graduating high school, the send off, the literal separation between adolescence and beginning your young adulthood. And that involves, whether that's going off into the workforce, getting a trade school or a full on university. Like there is a physical feeling in that transfer of responsibility, personal responsibility, I guess, that you're right, that people are just going to miss out on now. And honestly, I didn't even think about that. So
yeah, it's rough. It's a rough time for the, high school seniors, and really tough for high school senior parents too, because those emotions on both launching your child and that child being launched, both ends, there are the emotions. There are those emotions, that pride of being able to, one, for that senior to move on and to move out and to grow, and for that parent to acknowledge that they successfully were able to do that. And, those feelings don't have to be lost because of the coronavirus. But however, because of all that's going on, it's harder to experience that feeling in full right now.
Yeah, the completion, I feel like all the finish lines now are very ambiguous wherever they are, even when it comes to bringing things back and, the government and, if you're from California, the Gavin Newsom stuff that he talks about on his, sometimes it just feels very open-ended regardless of who you're listening to. And to me, that's kind of been a thing that I've seen a lot of people struggle with. Like the finish line is gone. Right. So where do we find a new finish line? Where do we find happiness now that completion of certain things isn't going to be what is going to bring us happiness? So yeah, I asked myself those questions now that, say, graduation is gone. Obviously, there was a psychological element in what we had built up, but now that it's gone, was it important? If it was important, what do we replace it with in the new era? And not necessarily trying to ask you these questions for an answer, but rhetorically, things have changed. And I feel bad. I feel bad for the seniors. If you're a senior out there, congratulations on graduating. You've made it out of high school or college, if you're so lucky. So good job, guys. Yeah. We're giving it to you. You're doing awesome.
Absolutely. And I wish I could answer those questions. I really wish I could, but I can't.
I wish I could too.
Yeah. But for seniors who are having that loss, I would encourage seniors and their families to still do something that commemorates that senior, to still celebrate and to acknowledge and to just build up whoever that senior is, so that they
Absolutely.
can still at least have that feeling of knowing that they're seen, that their accomplishments matter, and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This is not forever. One day they will be fully at college.
Or fully adults eventually. Yeah. I guess that's the end point. Yeah.
Yes. And it doesn't disqualify or dismiss any of the hard work they have done to get to where they're at. So
right.
Seniors.
Everything is valid. Everything that you've done so far is 100% valid, and just because you don't get a fancy band to play you a nice song and walk across the stage doesn't mean that you're not just as important as a person and as valuable to our society. So, all right, so one of the things that I've personally been dealing a lot with is my girlfriend is part of the news. She is a producer on a local news show, and every time something happens, I am 100% the first person that she comes to tell me, "Oh my goodness, did you hear what so and so did? Did you hear what law so and so passed or whatever?" So I'm very much in the news when things happen, and personally, with the onslaught of the current situation, not like it wasn't an onslaught of news before, but with the current situation, I'm just finding myself to be completely like exacerbate now, like just exhausted. That's the word I want to use. Yeah, I find myself to be completely exhausted all of the time. But if I stop watching the news and stop being, paying attention to what's going on, the guilt that immediately sets in is beyond comprehension. And like, so for those of us who enjoy, and I would say there is a little, even if it's masochistic joy, it's still a little bit of joy in knowing what's going on around me. Maybe it's just a semblance of control, but to me, it feels like a little bit of joy to know I have a finger on the pulse of the world at any given moment. How do we, and people like me, deal with that constant negativity? Because quite honestly, though there are little sprinkles of of positivity, negativity sells ads. It sells people's attention to people's attention spans. It is the main thing that people want to talk about and do on in those formats. And it's heavy. It's really heavy. Yeah, I kind of wanted to engage you on some of your thoughts on how to kind of deal with the onslaught of the negativity in the news.
Of course, yeah, and that's a huge topic right now. I think, everyone is going to react differently to the news. Some people might totally be fine waking up every morning and looking at the New York Times. Other people may not be able to even look or even hear the word coronavirus again because it just carries so much weight. And so, my biggest suggestion is to really, take the time to check in with yourself, acknowledging and taking the time to pause and see where you're at. Are you over here where the news is okay and you want to know and it's not overwhelming? Or are you over here where hearing the word coronavirus just makes you full of anxiety? And so, really taking the time to check in with yourself. And, if you do want to keep looking at the news, because it does bring a sense of, knowing what's going on, having some sort of control, I would, suggest that people, immediately after they're done watching or done hearing the news is to practice grounding. And that will help bring, that person back into the room. So they're not so overwhelmed and not so just, even numb to what's going on. It'll help them bring them back into themselves. And so how you do that is, taking some time to look around your physical space and to acknowledge maybe four things that you see in the room. It's having maybe some kind of sense, some kind of like flowers or essential oil on hand so you can smell. That will help bring a person back into the room.
Right.
Taste, bubble gum, mints, you know, instantly pop a mint into your mouth, and that will help kind of bring you back into the room. Deep breathing and acknowledging what you physically feel on your body, like the fabric of your shirt, or maybe go outside and stand in the grass for a second and just think about what it feels like to stand in grass and just breathe and remember, where you're at, you know, what is around you and what is real in your life in this moment
Hmm.
personally.
Right.
Um, and so I highly recommend grounding as a way to maneuver through some of what's going on in the news right now, because you're right. Fear is it definitely sells, unfortunately, but there's also truth in what's going on and what's being told. And so acknowledging that truth without feeling like you have to get overwhelmed and checking in with yourself and seeing, okay, can I handle this? Can I hear this? Am I able to receive this right now? And if not, then it's not yours to carry.
Right. Being I guess being more aware of your own mental state obviously is kind of a big key in that, and being able to recognize, hey, this is going to, if I, if I spend 20 minutes reading Reddit news about whatever, I have to be conscious at the end of that to say that I'm going to be in an elevated state just intrinsically because I know that's what happens when I read the news or read articles regarding certain topics or whatever. So interesting. I'm aware of grounding, the power of it with for panic attacks and things like that. And I've never considered it necessarily as a more passive form of kind of putting everything back into perspective. I've always seen it as more of the emergency tool, wrap gauze around it, he's bleeding kind of a thing, ground him. Maybe it's just because I've seen a lot of people have panic attacks and try to like pull it back together. But yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of it like that, to use it as a more of a low key passive way to just bring yourself out of the headspace. Because I know specifically for people who have dogs and have done dog training, that's the way you do it. You have to break their attention from whatever the problem is, the cat, the squirrel, whatever it is, that they need to be, they need to be sitting and paying attention to you and not whatever else is going on. And they need that snap of some kind of something to break their attention. So they go, oh, I need to pay attention to the owner, kind of a thing. So it's the same thing we need to do to ourselves, is have our moments of snap, go, hey, you need to pay attention to what's really important here. Ground yourself, look at what is physically around you, because no matter how many times you look at what's metaphysically around you in the internet space, it's not what's really happening. It's elsewhere. It's everywhere else. Providing it's not your next door app, because that could be your neighbor. But other than that, it's remote. So don't let it affect you physically in the moment in that way, and to use grounding to kind of assist in that. I guess is what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Being present, just where you're at, where you are in the moment, out within yourself, within your home, just being present with yourself.
A lot of people I see right now are very enclosed by their world space, just because of, like you said, they're addicted to their job, or that was their life because they had to provide for their family, and that's all they had time for, is because their family, that's what the family needed to survive. So do you have any tips for people, or any tools or anything for people who are maybe struggling with these feelings, how to kind of like right ourselves in this world that are so wrong?
Yeah, and the number one thing that comes to mind is therapy. If you're finding that you do not know what your purpose is, if you're finding that you are struggling a lot, please reach out to someone who's professional, who can help you, because and especially in this time, trying to find your purpose might be hard to do by yourself. So I recommend, absolutely, if you're struggling with finding purpose, with finding joy in this time, with being able to not to sorry, I inched my nose. um, if you're struggling to really find joy or purpose, or you're feeling like you're just in this hole, I highly recommend, professional help. And that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing to reach out to somebody, specifically a professional who could help you through this.
Absolutely. Do you know of any, like, have any resources you would recommend off the top of your head for people to reach out? Like, obviously, you can reach out to the church, and anybody's having issues, we can help make the connections to the various counselors and therapeutical agencies that we work with. But is there anybody you would suggest, or any phone numbers or anything like that?
Yeah, so actually, I created a resource list that's on our church website, which is
Fantastic.
awesome. So maybe, there could be a link to that, with this podcast.
I might put a link right here. Good, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for doing that for us, Janelle. That is immensely helpful, I'm sure, to the people who are struggling and need just somebody to reach out to. And if you, and I encourage anyone who else who is having issues and maybe doesn't necessarily feel comfortable reaching out quite yet to a professional, or doesn't necessarily want to take that step, that there are people here in the church that would just love to talk with you. We're here. Janelle's here. She's doing that. She's calling people. You may get a call from Janelle if you call in and leave a message and say, "Hey, I just want somebody to talk to." Doesn't like I don't care if you're lonely. We want to talk to you. That's the whole point of being on this earth, is to have the experience with one another. So please reach out to us. Reach out to your friends. We need to do a better job as humans of communicating with each other in this time. Well, Janelle, that is just about everything I wanted to talk to you about this time. Thank you so much for being on the show. I wanted to just kind of cap it off with one thing that I know you're a big proponent of, and is ultimately the reason I asked you to talk on this show, is the topic of mindfulness and being mindful, and how those techniques can help us day to day, especially right now, everything that's going on. But this is obviously is much more of a permanent life changer, a thing that you can do going forward.
Right. So mindfulness is a wonderful, wonderful tool. There's a lot of research behind mindfulness in regards to how it helps the nervous system be able to relax, and also bring a heightening of awareness of where you're at, of what you're feeling, of being able to give you that space just to breathe and to take a second and just to be with yourself. And I think that, especially in this time, mindfulness can really give everyone an opportunity just to take a second away and to take a break away from all that's going on in the world, and just to take a moment with themselves and to identify, okay, what's going on within me? Where am I at? And just taking a moment or two of breathing. Mindfulness, if you guys don't know, is a technique of just, sitting and breathing in silence. And what you do is you just kind of allow yourself to have that mindfulness space, and to just check out and check in with certain areas of your body, maybe like do a little bit of a scan of what your muscles feel like, or where your head is at for the day, and just taking a few moments of silence. There's some great apps out there for mindfulness called Calm and Headspace. Also, YouTube has free mindfulness guides as well. They're just a few minutes to an hour long.
I will say that you got to be careful sometimes with the YouTube ones, because there are jerks out there that make those and then put loud noises in the middle of them.
Oh, rude.
Yeah, I went through a phase where I was trying to listen to white noise while I slept, and was woken up one evening at 3 hours into a 10-hour long video of literal screaming bloody murder. Trying to figure out where it was coming from and slapping my phone to shut it off. So I will say, be a little careful and look at the channels on YouTube if you're going to check something out on YouTube, to make sure it's a legitimate source of calm energy.
And if sitting and being quiet is not your thing, if you're just like a moving person, I would recommend stretching and breathing. Yeah. I recommend stretching and breathing, and being able to, follow some stretching videos online. And so, yeah, I definitely recommend mindfulness as a way to take a break and to breathe and to listen to where you're at. If you want more information on mindfulness, there's a great show on Netflix called The Mind Explained. And there's an episode called Mindfulness, and it'll give you a lot more a lot more information there. And mindfulness is not necessarily a spiritual practice. It can be. You can integrate the Lord into mindfulness, and that's a beautiful way of having quiet time with the Lord. But if you just want to just be mindful and be quiet with yourself, it doesn't have to be a spiritual practice, but it can if you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. I find that kind of like you were speaking to earlier, I find my mindfulness out in nature. I'm a camping kind of guy. I like to feel the grass and the dirt, smell the dirt. I'm an olfactory kind of person too. I have a really sensitive nose. So when I need to have those times of mindfulness, I will purposely seek out quiet places in nature, full of smells because that's the one thing that'll make sure that my adult ADD doesn't take over and put my brain in another place. Because for those of us who struggle like that, mindfulness becomes a bit of a task to get into. You have to learn how to do it, and it's not exactly easy. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Janelle. I want to say thank you for everything that you're doing with Sunrise. You're doing a fantastic job. Everybody's, I'm sure everybody's really happy when they get a call from you to actually talk to a human being once again. And like I said before, I encourage anyone who needs the help to reach out to us. Janelle's here. I won't be here because I do a lot of production stuff, but if by any means you have my cell phone number and need to text me, I will text you back, and I am here for anyone. So thank you everybody for watching our very first episode of The Beat. I hope you got something good out of this. Thank you to the pastors and the other departments for allowing us to do this. Come back next week, or I guess in 2 weeks when we do this again, because this is going to be every 2 weeks. That next Friday. So thanks, guys. See you later. Bye.